I'm sure most people know the line as the Reading branch, or the Perkiomen branch of the Reading. Other people know it as the Perkiomen Railroad. A lot of people don't realize this. The actual railroad itself actually started back, the premise started in 1852. Started out as the Norristown and Freemansburg Railroad. That never got off the ground because in 1854, the North Penn Railroad decided to charter the same basic route. So, figuring that you don't want any competing routes and it would make sense to have the same route, they rechartered it again the same year as North Penn as the Norristown and Allentown Railroad. And a few years into it, they ran into what most railroads ran into when building a brand new railroad from scratch is funding, labor, and the big thing was getting land from people. Because just trying to sell somebody on putting a railroad through their backyard is not really a thing most people are into. I'd love to have that. Much like they found out later on when they tried putting the trail in at the gate, people, once the railroad went out, people kind of took over the land and when it goes back up. That's another presentation. So, and then a few years down the line, the Civil War broke out, and of course, you know, when you have not just a civil war, but a war takes a lot of funding and manpower and everything you can imagine. So the railroad was pretty much put on hold again until the end of the Civil War. March of 1865, they was rechartered again as the Perkiomen Railroad Company. So March of 65, it became the Perkiomen Railroad Company, which would start in Oaks and eventually end up at the junction in the East Penn in Emmaus. The construction began, but once they got going, of course, the same troubles were still there, but by 1867, the construction started at the other end, the end of Oaks. By 1868, the line made its first trip into Collegeville, which was the first section finished. 1869, we have a slide presentation, I'll show a picture later, made it to Schwanksville by 1869. 1872, which is interesting, it made it to Green Lane at the beginning of the year, and by later 1872, the line made it into Pennsburg. But in 1872, because the line ended in Green Lane, a little fact most people don't know, there's actually a turntable at one time in Green Lane. We just found that out a couple years ago. We were talking to a couple guys and found an old article from the 1800s from the Philadelphia Reading newsletter or magazine where they talked about the turntable. The turntable wasn't in Green Lane very long because it was then moved down to Pennsburg. Does anybody realize there was a turntable at Pennsburg? I have a book, one of the historical postcard books, and I'm sitting there one day reading the book, and I set it down on my lap and watching TV, and the part for Pennsburg had a picture, and I could see in the background the Pennsburg station and all that stuff. And I picked up my magnifying glass I just bought, and I looked down, and I'm like, wow, there was a roundhouse and a turntable in Pennsburg. After years of staring at that picture, just kind of glazed over it, never realized it. But we have a picture, we'll show that in the slide presentation. So in 1874, finally the line made it to Emmaus. Another debate always was, when was the line finished? 1874 or 1875? The thing was, the line on both ends were completed in 1874, but because of the Dillinger Tunnel, they didn't run end to end until 1875, because the Dillinger Tunnel wasn't finished until 1875. So, as popular as this line is, as you can tell, the information isn't always as easy to come by as you would think. So, until some years back, we weren't confident enough to say the exact date of when the line was run end to end. Because you'd hear 74, 75. You'd even read it in publications, different dates. So, 1875, the first train ran the whole line. And like every railroad, the Perkiomen Railroad did freight and passenger. At the peak of the popularity in the late 1920s, they were running 8 trains a day, 8 passenger trains a day. 4 up, or back. But then, as any other railroad, once the popularity of cars and availability of cars started coming, the short, nobody needs to take a train to go from Swanksville to Green Lane by the 30s or so, because the cars were readily available. So the popularity of passenger trains started to fade off. And then by July 15th, 1955, the last passenger train ran the whole length of the Perkiomen by 1955. That was the last passenger. And just to show how limited we were with transportation back then, the Perkiomen line is 38.5 miles from Oaks to Emmaus. It's 38.5. At one point in time, there was 28 stations.
Wow.
So if you do the math, you figure 28 stations and 38 miles. I mean, to this day, you can still go down to Pennsburg Station and you can see the Greenville from Pennsburg. So the thought of having a station agent and a train stop that close together, it's hard for us nowadays to imagine that you would need train stations, 28 stations and 38 miles. Another thing, which was big, was freight. Ice houses were a huge commodity because of the clean water of the Perkiomen. From Palm down to Salford, there was one time six ice houses at one time. Cigars, although none of the cigar factories actually had sidings or service, but cigar factories were a commodity of freight. The other thing too were quarries. There were several quarries. We have a couple of them in the slide presentation. And the broom works in Red Hill, which, according to an article I was reading, the railroad didn't get anywhere close to the broom works. It was several blocks down the road. But the broom works used the railroad a lot for shipping out the brooms. But like everything else, the freight traffic declined a little bit later on. And but freight was still run until the end of the era of the Reading. Another thing that Perkiomen was good for was vacationers. People from the city, because of the camping and the clean water of the Perkiomen Creek and the scenery, people came from the city, from Philadelphia, for a vacation spot. It's hard to believe this area was once a very hot vacation spot for people to travel to, but pretty much from Collegeville down through Swanksville, there were summer camps, cottages, hotels, and even farmers during, I don't know about farming, but there's times when they would use their fields and set up temporary camps over the summer. There was that many people coming in. And it was to a point, there was that much traffic for visitors coming into the area that at one point in time on Sundays to take the vacationers back to the city, there were 12 to 14 coaches, long trains taking the past people back to the city. It was that popular. And then the other thing, which is often up for debate, was people say, well, wasn't it always the Reading? Philadelphia Reading. Philadelphia Reading was the predecessor to the Reading. Some people say totally different railroads. I believe it's same thing. As far as
Same railroad.
Look, I have a friend who will swear to me that those two railroads were totally different. I don't know where he gets that from, but it became the Reading in what, 1924.
You thank the government for
that. So in 1865, soon after the railroad was started to construction and rechartered as the Perkiomen Railroad, the Philadelphia Reading, later the Reading, the Philadelphia Reading actually took controlling interest in it. It was still the Perkiomen Railroad for all intents and purposes until 1945. I mean, we have shipping receipts and ticket stubs that have it'll have Perkiomen Railroad Company, but it'll have the Reading logo. So they had controlling interest most of the existence of it until 1945, when it became solely the Reading branch, the Perkiomen branch of the Reading Company, 1945. But although from 1979 to 1887, Philadelphia Reading pulled out, and the Perkiomen Railroad was its own entity with no ties to any other railroads. Although they leased their equipment from the Reading, but 79 to 87, it was its own creation. And then many people know, April 1st, 1976. What happened that date?
April Fool's Day.
April Fool's Day. Another government action, Conrail. Conrail started and basically took over all the major carriers that were in bankruptcy at that point. Reading was in bankruptcy, I think Jersey, Lehigh Valley, they were all in bankruptcy. So the government stepped in, consolidated them. That's where Conrail came from, Consolidated Rail. So, and that took effect in '76, which broke the Perkiomen up a little bit, although they still ran from Emmaus into Pennsburg, which they still do to this day. And from the other end, they ran as far as Arcola and Collegeville.
And they went to college.
Yeah, during the Conrail years. We have pictures, I forget if they're in the slide presentation or not, of Conrail operating both ends of the line. Also the track, and then 1983, anthracite lines took over from Conrail. 1989, the Blue Mountain Reading took over. Then in 1995, East Penn, who still owns the line, operates the line today, the East Penn Railroad, took over the line in 1995. And I forget the date, but East Penn actually physically bought the line in early 2000s, somewhere around there. So the line from Pennsburg to Emmaus, which is still run, East Penn Railroad technically owns the line. So it's one reason why we haven't seen an excursion in several years on the Perk branch, but again, that's another discussion for later. Also, the line that is now was torn up, the first section of line from Southford to Harmon, where Crusher Road is, where the trailhead is, outside of Harleysville. That first section was the first section of rail that was removed. That was in 1973. Because Reading was in bankruptcy, the line wasn't being used, and they needed rail. Because after World War II, the Perkiomen branch was converted to heavy rail, 130-pound rail, to run the newer, larger steam engines like the T1s. So the Reading branch, even though it was a branch at that point, had heavy rail. So what they did was, the Reading, being frugal, they took the rail, because it was heavy rail for the main line, but they left the ties in. So they went to file for abandonment. Well, what happened was the locals thought it was abandoned, so they started taking the ties and using them for their gardens. And I'm not saying names, but I know people who use them in fireplaces and burn the pre-sewed ties in the fireplaces. Yeah. That was the 70s, you know. So they almost got in trouble for what they called a backdoor abandonment. I guess they thought that was like intended, but they were like, no, we intended to put the rail back in, which they didn't. Like they said they would. Does anybody know what the rail weighting is? Like a 130-pound rail? Every 3 feet, if you say 100-pound rail or 130-pound rail, every 3 feet, if it's a 130-pound rail, every 3 feet is 130 pounds. So most main lines and most rail you see nowadays, except for short lines and tourist lines, is 130-pound rail. So next time you see that rail, think about it. Every 3 feet of that's 130 pounds. So it's got some weight to it. So yeah, like I said, so the line, the abandonment was the first part, was taken out through there. And then in 1980, the line from the other, just past Green Lane up to Pennsburg was taken out in 1980. Which we're working on another different slide presentation with some more newer stuff. We're going to have a section in there about that, me as a kid playing on the gathering up my ties and stuff and pulling it out.
Trust
I was 6.
Remember, this is arcade. There's no stature on it.
I knew a guy. I still have some of this bike, so I can return. So before we get into the slide presentation, is there any other questions about the history of the line, or any questions?
Was there a connection from this line to get into Philadelphia?
Yeah, not directly, but indirectly. in Oaks. They would go into Oaks where the convention center is now. That was called Perk Junction. Just past the convention center was called Perk Junction. And then you could interchange there. And that would take you, you could go to Norristown from there, Philadelphia. So that was the connecting routes there in Oaks. And then the other end was, if you ever go down, they used to call it the Alder Mile in Allentown, Lehigh Street, I don't know if they call it that anymore.
No,
If you go to Passport, you ever see the road that, right, once you go outside of UMays, you'll see signs of Harris Street. When you go up that road, you'll see a double track, then a single track going by. The double track was the original East Penn main line, which is down Norfolk Southern. And the line next to it is the Perk, which is where they still interchange today. And you can interchange there to go into Allentown, Bethlehem, then up to New York, and that would basically be like your northeast corridor, as they call it now, kind of.
Now, did it come down and cross over to Schuylkill at Norristown, and then come down the Norristown line,
You could get it from there, but it
or it
didn't.
just stayed on the west side of
Yeah.
Schuylkill?
Yeah, it crossed over the river in Oaks. Then once you got to where they call Perk Junction, but once you interchange, or that line then went into the main line.
Yeah,
The Reading main line then went into Norristown.
right.
You know when the McLean road station was closed?
I'd be safe to say the early 50s, 53, 54.
That's when a lot of the smaller stations
I'd have to look it
were
up, but
closed. Yeah.
Thanks.
The Pennypacker use the trains.
Oh yeah.
oh,
Yeah, we got a
absolutely.
little part here later on with the picture. He rode the train. He rode the regular train, but he also had his own private train too. That during the summer months when he was down here more, 3 to 4 months out of the year, he had his own train. What's that? Yeah. But yeah, Pennypacker, he definitely used the train a lot. We have a picture, which we never put in the slide because we can't verify it, but it used to be a covered bridge when you came in here. There used to be a covered bridge on the road that would cross over the train. It would stop right at the tracks. And there was a little guard shanty there, crossing shanty. And we were sent a picture of a guy standing in the shanty. And they swore that was Governor Pennypacker waiting on the train. I talked to a couple people about it, and they said probably wasn't him, but you can't really see. It's not a great picture, so you can't really tell. So with historical stuff, there's a lot of hearsay. So we try to, unless we have a definite fact for it, we try to not add it in. So. Okay. Anybody see the screen? There's the Dozen Sack.
What the heck's that?
Dozen Sack. Nowadays, you have to basically trespass to get to it. Do you know where Powder Valley is? Outside of Palm? Where Corning is? If you go down the tracks, everybody ever see the pictures? There was a cement base of a water tower. It's still there out past Powder Valley. If you go to Station Road in Palm, go up Station Road over the tracks, come to the T, make a left, and then you make that Trifler, make a right on Trifler, and you follow it all the way down there. You'll see the remains of a water tower base, a red brick base that's sitting there. If you go about an 8 mile past there, that's where Hosensack Station is. And if you know where to look on Trifler and you look up, you can actually still see the dirt road and the weeds still cut out from once they had a road to get your cars up to the station. You can still see the road. And there's a blacktop section to get over because the road, it looks like a lake or something. That's not a lake. That's Trifler Road is actually behind the station. I mean, it looks like a pond or something, but right about here where you can't see, the road came up, and they actually blacktopped so you can drive over it. The parking was over here, which is high, but this was the parking. And when they went, if you go down there to this day, the blacktop is still over top. You can still see the roadway, and you can still follow the road where it goes down to Trifler. I guess. Okay, so that's the south. Let's get confused. Here's the south end of Dillinger Tunnel.
See the light at the end of the tunnel.
That is the north end.
North end?
The north end?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the south and north.
It's got
I've got the shroud between.
I totally need a,
That was a test question. You passed.
Never eat
That was good.
I need to carry a compass with me because my north and south, I never can get there. This end, there's not a lot of pictures of this end, mostly because it's not the good looking end.
And I can see it's gonna be the turnpike.
Yeah, the turnpike actually crosses, the turnpike actually goes over top of this tunnel. Every time I'm on the turnpike, I try to find where I'm at, and I don't know.
Tough when you're doing 100.
Yeah, I never can find out. I know I've been over top of that tunnel of the turnpike 100 times. I know it, but I just don't know. Yeah. Oh, does it? Oh, I'll try that.
Some form.
No, it's not restored.
So yeah, so this is
On the slate.
when you go in the other end of the tunnel, of course, you know, you got the concrete, you got the nice facade in the front. It's all brick and it looks really nice. It's almost like an old subway. But for some reason, once you get about a quarter of the way through, it looks like you're in a cave. It's just the bare rock, and then there's nothing again in this one. Minus all the wood, it kind of looks the same as it does now. I don't know why they didn't finish the rest of it or what the point was, but probably money. Yeah. This is what I was talking about. This is the water. This base is still here. When you get on Trifler Road, you look to your left, you'll see the base.
Steve, I think that's
Carl's Hill Road.
Yeah, it's Carl's Hill.
Well, yeah, this road is the road that comes up.
But
It's Palm
that's
Road.
Corning Palm Road.
One that goes next to it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Palm
when you
Road.
turn right, it's Corning Road, and then it turns into Palm Road.
at the county line. Here's the
Okay.
county. When you go up Station Road, you make that left.
Yeah.
There's the first road.
That where it
And
changes.
then
Serious people.
Trifler.
If it's Trifler, it goes under your can opener.
The can opener. Another. Anybody knows what the can opener is? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's. I went around the corner there for a little bit. I come around and you're like, oh, there's another one stuck.
people can't read the sign.
The height clearance is
People
like
can't read
9
9 feet.
What is it?
9 feet.
9 feet.
9 feet 8 inches.
I took a regular Ford van through there one time, and I actually cringed for a second. I thought I was going to hit it. But if you go right past that bend, that's where the Hoogensack station is. Just past that bend a little bit. That's back in there where the Hoogensack is. And apparently I was told not too long ago that the water tower was fed from an input on the top of the hill. I'm not sure how that worked, but apparently you can still see that there's like a catch drain or catch water for it.
Gravity.
Yeah, so that's up on the top of the hill.
Yeah.
Here's Palm Station. For some reason, that must have been a popular station. There's a lot of pictures and postcards of the Palm Station. This is the freight station down here. The brick part of it is still there. That still exists. And this is one of the sidings. At one time, there was plans to connect the Perkiomen Railroad to the Colbertdale Railroad. At one time, there's a Y in Palm, and the end of the Y is supposed to connect and actually connect it. We have, I don't know if we brought it or not, but we actually have a map that shows a drawing from 1880s something. Actually shows the map. It shows the Colbertdale line, it shows the Park branch, and in dots, it shows how they would have connected, supposed to connect it to. But the Y, as far as we know, the Y was actually mostly finished in Palm. And I tried to find the right of way and where it was, and I can't quite find it. But we're assuming this siding here where that boxcar is sitting was where the Y, that was part of the Y that went out. What a Y is, it basically, a lot of times they're used for turning engines around. If you have the railroad line this way, the line comes up on both ends like this. So if you have the train in the middle, take the engine off, go up, hit the switch, go back down and turn the engine around. So that's what a Y is. When people talk about Ys and railroad. That was an ice house in Palm. How many people remember that there was an ice house in Palm? That one was one of several on the Perk Ranch that burnt down. What's that? Yeah, I always joke around. I'm going to read a historical book sometime.
And then it burned.
Then it burned. Because if you read about railroad structures, amusement parks, buildings, so much of it burned. You find that a lot in the research. But this was the Hancock Ice House that was built in 1896, and in I think it was 1921 or 2 is when it burned. And basically, the reason most of them burnt was because they were wood, obviously, and they were insulated with sawdust. Most of the ice houses used sawdust for insulation back then. And sawdust is very flammable. And what they did was, most of them, I think this was one of the ones too, most of the ones that burned, there were eyewitnesses that cinders for the steam engines kicking up, going by, laying on the roof, started the fire. It got to a point so bad that the Perkiomen Railroad actually got sued. Got 1 or 2 lawsuits because of starting one fire. Not sure why they didn't put slate on the roof, but a lot of times you see around old railroads, with old railroad right-of-ways, a lot of times you'll see houses with slate. Not only was that a thing in time, but they would put slate because of the steam engines, so the cinders wouldn't catch your houses on fire. So you'll see that on the walk down the Perk Trail, you'll see a lot of the houses that are close to it, the old houses, you'll see slate roofs. And that's why.
They probably didn't want to go to the expense.
I'm sure it was expensive back then, but if you're probably worth the extra expense, not to have to worry about, you know. Here's a picture. This is when they were building the trestle. This is outside. This is outside between Palm and.
East Green.
No, I think it's the other end. No. But this bridge here, this picture, when I found this, the reason everybody's down here is that X right there, one of the workers fell. And apparently the guy working with him was so frightened by him falling that he fell also. So 2 workers fell. That's what the X is marked for. Everybody who's there. Nothing attracts a crowd like a crowd, you know. But that part of the trestle today, they were having maintenance issues with it because of being how tall it was and because of being wood. That trestle still exists, but it's actually backfilled. They actually filled that in. And the location, I always thought this was right past Palm Station where it goes up. But I was told it was actually down the other way. So I have to verify, but
The Hose and Sack Creek was over there.
Oh, you think that's between Carlsville Road and Powder Valley Road? That's a fill now. But
because it was filled. Now the one with the hose inside creek, that's still open.
This is a different
Yeah.
trestle.
Yeah, this is a different trestle.
That's just.
This is all backfilled now. It's not a trestle anymore. The trestle's still encased in it. I had somebody, I forget who it was, told me a couple years ago. Guy used to work on that branch a couple years back, verified it. But the location, I keep hearing conflicting stories. That's the actual location. But where the Hosensack Creek goes through, that's still open yet. This was totally backfilled to eliminate maintenance because they're having issues with it.
Well, not only that, but I think people were complaining that the train had too much movement going across that.
Yeah.
Making them nervous, so they filled it in.
Yeah, if you look at it, it's a little sketchy. I like it because it's got a bobber caboose, paddle back, and an old vertical boiler crane. That's what I like about it too. There's another Palm station. Like I said, Palm must have been popular because they there's a lot of pictures of postcards of Palm. Wait, where that's at?
29.
Yeah, 29 right near the Legion. The Legion's down there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, you can still kind of read Reading on it still. You can kind of still see the green and still see some of the Reading lettering on
We need
it.
to go up there and paint it.
I see it every day, so you can still see it.
Yeah. I often wonder that the town would be into that, wanting to repaint that, put Reading back like it was.
I'm game.
What upper Hanover Township doesn't know to the
You can just do it some night. Just
Yeah.
the trick would be to find some graffiti artists. What those people can do is
I get a loader
amazing.
down there, you can stay in the bucket.
About an hour.
Yeah. Every time I go over, I see a bridge or a side of a building, I see the graffiti. I'm like, how did they get up there?
Breaking all things done.
Oh yeah, in like 20 minutes they'll be done. Yeah, how they managed to do that? I don't endorse it, but it amazes me they can reach some of these spots. This is the Screenville. That's the original. You can kind of see it. I think we got a better picture then. That's the original Screenville station. You can see how nice the roads were back then. They always say the good old days. The good old days weren't all that clean or good in certain ways, yeah. There's another picture of the Screenville. I always like this one. Probably can't see, but that's an old New Jersey Central boxcar. One of their original logos for Jersey Central. Don't see a lot of them around. But that station was replaced because that one burned too. Which was replaced with the station, which is still there today. Yeah. A lot of killer men know this Daffy Junction. I actually talked to somebody who knew the owners who put that up there, and I forget the story why they put Daffy Junction on, but I forget the story about it. But it went up for sale about 4 years ago, and you wouldn't believe how many people messaged us. Even the realtor, I'm friends with the realtor, the guy who sold it. He sends me a message. We'll give you guys first dibs on it. I'm like, bank account several $100,000 short of buying it. I appreciate it, but
The Hartley House.
yeah,
Back then it was the American House.
the American House, and it's a little bit different these days.
A little?
But it was actually looked like it was kind of having some issues back then.
Yeah.
But another little, this is of course Pennsburg Station. This was a factory that also burned down. Now there's just like a foundation of something. They're putting something in there that can be fenced off. I don't know if I'm not sure what it is. But there's a siding there, the siding back there. That siding is still being used. They can store stuff on it. Another thing of interest: if you go down 4th Street and you look up and you go underneath there, there's still telegraph wires up. Not many places you can still see actual telegraph wires still across the telegraph pole. And the signal box for it, the telegraph, both the boxes are still in there.
That big building was, I think, was a cigar factory at one time.
Yeah, it was a cigar factory.
Eisenhower's cigar factory.
It was a cigar factory, and I think when it burned, I think it was luggage or handbags or something. But it started out as a cigar factory. Yeah, the first shop, that building's on this side.
Okay, that's apartment where Rick's phone is now.
Who's there now?
Rick's phone.
Rick's
Are they based out of there?
Yeah.
Okay. This was the picture I was talking about earlier. One of my favorite pictures. This is Pennsburg. That's the place, that's the one that burned. That's still there. That's where the thrift shop's at, or was. Can't see Pennsburg Station. Well, that's the Hartley House, or American House back there. That was the bowling alley and whatever that was just torn down some years ago. And the perception of it's kind of interesting when you look at it. That's actually the intersection, 663 and 29. That was the Oddfellows Hall, which was right on the corner, which I guess is nothing right now, but it's right next to where Ruby Land and Riviera was. But this is what I was talking about earlier. This was actually a roundhouse and a turntable. And this building, that's still there. The little cupola thing's gone, it's red now, that's there. Somebody asked us one time where this was taken. I said it was taken from a drone. You guys got a better laugh out of it than the person I told you. Just
Being tall for time.
Just picturing a drone with like a hot air balloon. And this picture is taken on top of the prep school, Perkiomen prep school. But yeah, I just find this really interesting because you can see the pit. But at this point in the picture, it was fixed straight because it had issues and they didn't need it anymore, so they just made it basically like a siding basically. So, right now, there's to this day. Actually, if you look, when you go over 3rd Street, you can still see the part of the siding that used to go into there. There's now a development right where that used to sit. Later on, it became Stokes. Stokes Manufacturing was there later on. Here's another shot of Pennypacker. You can see that's one that burned. That's one that's still there to this day. Oftentimes, for years, I always thought that there's loading doors were made for tractor trailers. I always like this doors on the side of that building was kind of high. It didn't seem right. But it was actually designed for a rail. It actually had a siding up in there for loading boxcars. This was a postcard that EBL. I don't know. Everybody knows who that is. There's a bunch of old pictures from back in that time with his initials on them. Not sure who it was, but this was behind the prep school. That was a special event they had at the prep school. People coming in from the city, so an event. The siding they're actually sitting on. If you go, the siding. I think there's tankers sitting on it right now. The siding is still there. Another one of my favorites. That's a lesser photograph station. That's Red Hill. First part was the actual station, and the freight station was built later on.
Is the station still staying down here?
Down there?
No.
Nah. The ice house, the milk house is still down there. The milk station, that's still standing. People nowadays, you go places, you think it's a modern thing, have advertisement everywhere and everywhere you go with advertisements in your face. There's actually not really all that news because all this, these were all advertisements. These are all different products and stuff for advertising. That would have been right across the street. Most people know where Levy school buses used to be. This is actually where later on was Levy school buses. And I always remember the name, Osmond Ryder. He had a scale house in there too, and he actually had one of the weights from the scale. My grandfather acquired it somehow. He used to use it for an anchor for his boat. He lived right there, yeah. Basically, except for this building, all these buildings they're still there. They're all still there yet. Another burnt ice house. This was the one. This is Green Lane. You come down the hill around the dam. We're heading into Green Lane. If you look down, you'll see like an old wall, like an L-shaped double wall. That was actually part of the chute. There was a motor inside that would run the ice up and down into the ice house. And at one of our talks, one of the guys told me that that motor that powered it is sitting down where the what was that, a museum at one outside of Finger Crusher Road, that abandoned village. Yeah. Apparently the motor that was in the base of that is laying on its side out behind that building somewhere. I never went back to look, but if you come down, you'll see it, and if you look when the leaves are when the leaves are down, you can actually see the abutment of the siding. You can still see the siding when you come down. Once you come down around, right before you go into Green Lane, and look, you'll see it. You can actually still see where the siding was. That was burnt The guy was at Green Lane Station watching the steam engine pull out from the siding, and he actually watched the embers kick up and land on the roof. The station wasn't as tall as skinny as it looks on the screen. I don't know why. Like I said, on this computer, it's not that tall. But this is Green Lane. At one point in time, Green Lane was one of the busiest stations on the branch. And because of the steep grade going up into town, they actually used to keep a helper engine to help push the longer trains up into town. Interesting thing, some of the trestles were actually covered bridges. They actually had covered bridges on the trestles. That bridge is still there as part of the trail. I think it's just the trail. Yeah, part of the trail now. And where that building sits, you can still see the cement slab in the weeds for that. And of course, the base of that water tower is still there. The owners of the, I'm not sure if it's the current owners or the owners who owned the shop before. I was talking to him one day, and apparently the owner wanted to knock that down, knock the stone base down, and his wife told him not to do it. And then when we told him exactly the history and how, she's like, I told him not to knock that down. But that was neat. That's actually made out of stone. All right, Mike. I said there was quarries along the line too. This is the Green Lane Track Rock Quarry. Out behind Young's. Out behind Young's. Some of these bases for the crushers are still there. They're still back there. We got permission one time to go out back and walk out back there. Besides the tracks gone, obviously, but the chutes and everything are gone, but it doesn't look too much different. It's clearly still a quarry, and it's amazing when you drive through Green Lane, you can't even really tell it's back there, even when you look, unless you actually walk back there. That's the, actually that's the first one.
Second one.
That's the second one. That was actually rebuilt. That one didn't burn. They basically rebuilt. They built a larger station, although that doesn't look very large in the picture. But the second one was built just because they needed a larger station. That's Perkiomen. That's pretty much right. If you pull into Perkiomen sales, not far from the road, that would be maybe about 60, 70 feet where the road is now.
If that.
Yeah. That's about where it's at. Here's a lesser seen picture. This is actually Pratt's. This is Pratt's Ice House. If you walk down the Perkiomen Trail, the stone wall is still next to the trail. And right behind here is the Pratt Station is right in there. That ice house also burnt. Same thing. One of the employees was in the Pratt Station, watched the steam engine pulling away, and again saw the embers land on the roof, and that also burnt. This is actually Pratt Station here. Just a small flagstop style station. This road's still here. It's out somebody's driveway. And you can't see it in any picture, but there's a big stone farmhouse type house behind this tree. And almost every picture we have of it, it's not there. You can't see it, but it was there. And this little cutout, when you're walking down the Perk Trail, it's not wood anymore, but there's still poles that come up. That little cutout is still there yet. So it's metal poles now. That's still there. This was down between Pratt's and Hendricks. That was actually the overflow ice house. And when you go down the trail, you can still see the curb, obviously. And this was the siding that went down to the ice house. And when the growth is in it, like in the wintertime, you can still see where the siding went down. It's amazing how much is still visible from the ground. That's when we do our trail talks on the trail. You can see there's so we point out how much is still visible, how much is still there. Anybody here at the Hendricks Quarry? This was between Pratt's and Hendricks, and there's a bench on the trail now. There's a bench that sits right there you can sit on. But this was a small quarry, which you can still see from the trail. There weren't a lot of derailments along the Perk, but for some reason there was 2 of them at that same exact spot. It looks like it was on the siding. Oftentimes the sidings weren't quite as maintained as the main lines. They tell the gauge over to the Arch Park truck, Richie Bear and Arch Parks. You have Valley. Yeah, the Leaky Valley. There's another picture of the like I said, that's actually the overflow ice out for Pratt's. So this area in here, not much is different, not much has changed. It pretty much looks about the same. Hasn't really been built up or anything, minus the ice out. Pretty much looks the same. Yeah. Now I always point out the wrong one, but you can actually see the point. He knows which Pratt's ice or Pratt's
Barely
station
say it, but that was Hendrick
or
Station
Hendrick Station.
coming around a big suite. Matter of fact, this building is sitting up here right now in a complete, you wouldn't recognize it.
I don't look at it anymore. That's very
It's,
long.
we were trying to save that.
We got pretty deep in actually trying to save the station and move it. It's just sometimes there's a lot of moving parts that don't move well. It's just logistics and a lot of things that fall into place. But if anybody wants to try to save it, the owners are up for it. So if they want to take it, move it, do something with it.
Well, got to be kept in the township. That's his request.
10 years ago, you could have took a shed, one of the shed trailers, one of the trucks that move sheds around. You could have took it in there and picked it up and moved it. But in the last 10 or 12 years, some of the storms we had and stuff, the front wall's falling out, and it's in pretty bad shape. But it's a shame we didn't find it 10 or 12 years ago. There's another thing that hasn't changed all that much. That Salford, pretty much minus the station, just about everything is still there. Salford Stationary looks pretty much like Salford Station, and that station was actually turned into a house a couple roads over on Zepp or Sepp.
Separated.
It's on that road. So when I was told they said it doesn't look like a station anymore. So I figured, okay, it's probably just a single-story house. How hard could that be to find? Just about every house on that road is a single-story house. So I drove down there thinking, oh, this will be easy. You know, like, wow, these all look like it could have been a station. But that wasn't uncommon for stations to be moved. The original Boyertown station isn't too far away from Boyertown. That's a house now. And you can kind of see it was a station. It just looks like they went this way and this way. Southward. The base of the summit, you can tell where the station is because the base of the semaphore pole is still there. Let's see that. Spring Mount, saying about how the tourist, how big tourist area was. Spring Mount was a real big tourist spot, probably up until the late 20s, early 30s. And you can tell by the picture, those are all Model Ts, probably mid-20s at the latest, probably. That station was also rebuilt, the original wooden station. This was built just to accommodate larger crowds because there's a park across there, and there was the Camp Rest a While, and there's several camps and cottages and all that stuff right in the area, so they made a larger station to accommodate it. And there's also, not too far down there, was a sign marker that she found one day when we were walking, pointed it out. I'm not sure what it used to hold. It was a whistle, flanger post or whatever, but it's the original base and pole just laying next to the trail. And we talked to the park, and they told us, if you can take it out, you can have it. So we underestimated it. We thought me and him could get it back in his truck.
It was heavy.
It's 3 foot by 12-inch square.
With the big pole still attached. Very underestimated what it was. But right as we're thinking, what are we going to do? Some guy jogging on the trail comes running over. I got it. Helps, grabs it, throws it on, and Runs off. All right. Yeah, I was like, how are we gonna get this thing up here? Here's another one of the covered bridges. This is behind the, well, what's it called? Nokia. Certain names of businesses. And you can still see that the trestle's still there. And this was a siding. There's that place next to Nokia's. They sell like salt and stone and stuff.
There was a coal yard there. Yeah, that was a coal yard. That sign went to a coal yard.
I think it goes the one next to it.
This is above where, this is on this side of Moki.
What's cool about that place though is when you drive by that place next to it, you still have the Reading anthracite sign. I don't know if it's a repop or not. If it's not a repop, the sign's worth quite a few bucks. Never figure out exactly. Never seen another marker like that. That's, I don't know if anybody's ever seen one of them before, but
That's the Delphi station, right?
yeah,
Holy grail.
that's the Delphi station, and that's some type of semaphore or signal post or something. I've never seen another one like that.
It's not a ball signal.
Holy grail.
Yeah,
Schwanksville.
the original Schwanksville station.
Guess what?
They burn.
It's now called, the newer station is now called Snoozies. And if you go in there, the second Schwanksville train station sign is actually hanging up inside. You can tell it's the later one because it's got the porcelain on the front. The original one probably burned at the station. That's also in Schwanksville. That was the Reading Rambles. That was the Touch of Dutch special in Schwanksville. Always amazes me. That was 60, 59.
60.
60, 1960. Steam engines as an everyday sight wasn't that far removed by that year. So it's always only a handful of years that steam engines were an everyday occurrence. And they ran specials with them, and they attracted that kind of crowd.
Just,
I mean, like 5 years or 6 years after steam engines were basically phased out, they still attracted that type of attention. It's amazing the allure of a steam engine.
Steve.
tell them, in
And we're
1960,
drawing this kind of crowd.
Yeah, and
Schwanksville only had 600 people. The Reading brought in 800 people on that Iron Horse Ramble special. Doubled the size of the town.
And if anybody wants to visit that engine's
That's
part
in
of
Steamtown, 2124.
They did a cosmetic restoration on it a few years ago. It looks nice. They'll never operate as long as Steamtown is, but it's in nice condition cosmetically. It looks nice.
The sister engine is still running up on the Blue Mountain in Reading.
Yeah, they just came back
Oh,
last
she
year.
ran this whole season there. The O2's running, the 2100 they're rebuilding, and the 2101 is down in Baltimore at the museum. There's 4 of them left, 4 T1s left.
So if you ever get a chance and you see, like he was saying, her sister engine, the 2102, Reading and Northern runs it. If you ever get a chance to ride behind it or go watch it, it's impressive. Yeah. This, I don't know why it's in here. He did this one time.
Show you.
It's a map of the line, and you can see that maybe because, I don't know, it's a map. Actually, go back a second.
Shows the junction for Philadelphia.
Yeah, somebody earlier said about Philly. This is Perk Junction down here at Oaks. And you can see, just click on that again. You see it's at Philadelphia Reading. This is where you would interchange down in here. That would take you to go to Philadelphia and Norristown. That would be the intersection. Oak Station still exists. Last I heard, it was a politician's office, and I think after he moved out, he became for a short time in the dental office or something. The dental, not very big. I'm not hanging too much of the dental office, but it's in nice shape. I know the guy who owns it. I tried getting it off him, but nothing to get rid of it. A lot of the stuff we have in our collection that I really like is personal unpublished fiction. This was given to us by
Don't roll.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember which one's his great grandfather. His great grandson gave us this. Posted it on our page one day and he said, he says, my great grandfather worked two different branches on the road. I don't know, because I don't know where this was taken at. So can you guys tell where it's at? As soon as I saw that window, I knew where it was. Pennsburg Station. You can also see PS, but you can't see this picture, but that's the telegraph sign. But this is in front of Pennsburg Station. That's the early house there. Okay, next.
There we go.
Here's the Pennypacker and his train crew. This was taken in East Greenville, at East Greenville Station. Like I said, he had 3 to 4 months out of the year. He had his own train. I've heard reports that he rode the regular train often too, but he had his own private train. I was doing some research last night, so I'm trying to figure out if he had a private car, like there's a lot of politicians and people have their own private cars, or if it's his whole train set. It says Philadelphia Reading on the side, but a couple books I've been researching, I cannot find that engine in the roster. Yeah, so.
If I remember correctly, reading the caption, it said that when he wasn't using the train, then they would regularly, they would let passengers use the train.
Yeah, some passengers may use it. But that building here behind it, that's torn down years ago. Well, I think we got one or two left. And we ended on this picture. This was taken in July 15th, 1955. This was taken down in Collegeville Station. There's a video out that's done by the Hawk Mountain Historical Society of the last run of the Perkiomen branch, or the passenger run. And you can actually see this scene on the video. This picture is taken, and if you look just right, you can actually see the person taking this picture in the video. It's pretty neat.
Mule train.
This was the engineer. I don't know why she looks so happy, because this was he retired the same day. This was his happy looking around, or
She had a honey-do list like this long.
that was in the box probably.
That's why he doesn't look so happy.
He must have got a clean hat for that day. Even though they ran a diesel that day, it was a diesel that pulled that last run.
What's around his,
Yeah, because like I said, the last run, I guess he figured a lot of guys actually when dieselization started. A lot of guys near the end of their retirement didn't want to learn how to run a diesel. So a lot of guys were like, "Well, now's my time to retire." Now this is '55. Diesels were still basically being phased out around that time. So I'm not sure that's why he retired. He figured the Perk run was his last. But anyway, that was the engineer's retirement picture after running last.
where is the Collegeville station located in Collegeville?
You know when you come down where the Collegeville Diner is, do you know where that's at?
Yeah.
Basically right there.
Really?
Yeah.
I ate there yesterday.
No, it was right there.
Yeah.
The station was right there where the diner.
If you go behind the diner, there's a little wooded section next to the parking lot. There's a little telegraph pole that you leads for the station. So yeah, that's the Collegeville station. Where the diner is. All right. Yeah, I'm sure. I've seen some of you guys picked up or had the brochures. And maybe would be interested in joining us. 15 a year. We have a thing in the back to go out and send to us. And we have newsletters and different pictures and sort of things we send out throughout the year. And when you have certain events or things going on, we'll let membership know. And trying to go with more active membership base. We're trying to start getting actual membership meetings going. And we'll have like once a month or a month and a half or so, where we have a presentation of different people, different slideshows and things like that. So all stuff we're working on. So, so thank everybody for coming out today. It's great seeing you all here.